Hello, everybody. Thanks for visiting. Nice to see you again, and thanks for having me at Hustef second time. Today we are going to speak about the atomic test in automation test and how we can achieve it and how we can basically make better automation. Very shortly about myself, I have 15 years experience in automation. Worked in different huge companies, worked in the international companies from the Europe to the US, and right now I'm going to join another huge healthcare company for the next adventure. Good. What are the atomic tests? The atomic tests are the tests which are concentrating on a specific case or functionality, and they are isolating the case from other tests. This is very easy to say in one or two sentences, but very hard to implement and very hard to get there. So today we are going to go through some tricks, how we can do, how I done it in my experience, and how you can implement it in your experience. First of all, let's see what are the benefits of atomic tests. The fast execution, high stability, easier maintenance, clear test cases, and enhanced reusability. In my opinion, the automation is automation when it's fast. I had a lot of experience talking to the people, and I had a chance to scale my team from 20 people to 100 people in one of my experiences, and I done like daily basis, like 5 to 7 interviews, basically all the days. And interesting fact about that interviews were like, when I was asking like, how many tests do you have in your automation suite? And the candidates were answering like from 100 to 200. And the next question when I was asking, and how long it takes to run? And they said like, overnight. It's not automation, guys. So when something is running overnight, it's not like the best automation. We can improve it. To be more specific, I had experience in my life when we were running 7,000 Selenium tests within the 40 minutes. And we were saying, it's super slow. In my last experience when we were developing the mobile apps, very heavy UI, like visual stuff, we were having 2,500 tests which were running on the Android in-house mobile farm within the 2 hours. And it was, again, very slow for me. So one of the things that we have to do, we should make sure that the automation is fast. And today we are going to review some tricks how we can make our automation suite run fast. Whenever we are talking about atomic versus non-atomic tests, I want to show you this example. This is the example of non-atomic test because it's logging in from the UI, it's opening the project page, selecting some options, giving a name and stuff, and then going to the project detail page to do some checks. What we are going to achieve in the end of the presentation, we should convert this test to this one because it's easy enough to do it. Because we need to do some checks in the project detail page, not in the flow of the logging or something like that. The importance is isolating the functionality, the parallel testing. This is very, very important. If you want to do automation, and it should be fast, you have to do the parallel running. Easier maintenance, reduce debugging time, and then provide quicker feedback from the CI. In the big companies, or in any companies, IT companies, whenever we are working in automation, we have the customer, which is the engineering team. And our customer, the main requirement will be fast feedback. Because they want to do the change, we want to make sure that the change is safe, we need fast results on the automation. And to make sure that our customer is satisfied, we should speed it up. And one of the main important things is parallel execution. To be able to run the test in parallel, we should have isolated tests, so there should not be dependent tests. Every test itself should be able to live their life. The test should be atomic. The test data should be managed effectively, and it should be dynamic. So there shouldn't be like hard-coded stuff, and or like the way when one test is running and creating a data, and the next test is using the data. That will make a mess when we are running them parallel. So let's find out several tricks how we can achieve the atomic test automation. All the examples from my experience, and all the examples you can find in my GitHub repository in different projects, but all of them are available there. First of it is data, like test data preparation, how we are preparing the test data. Database seeding, whenever it's possible. Usage of power of JavaScript, and usage of the REST API for creating the test data. Let's go one by one and give you examples how we can do it. Whenever we're talking about the test data preparation, there is three main points: data preparation, test run, and cleanup. We should always clean up the data that we created for the test or during the test. This will allow us to make the isolation. This will allow us to not have dependent failures in the future. So why it's very important, we create the data, we run the test, we remove, delete all the data that we created for the specific case. I will show you an example in the end of the presentation. Database seeding. This is the case whenever we have, for example, like static data, which we can just import to the database and use it and then remove it. There's one very detailed difference of using a database snapshot and using a database seeding. Whenever you use a database snapshot and there is some like schema is changed in the database, you have to change all your backup image that you are using. Whenever you are using a small portions of seeding, whenever database schema is changed, you change only one specific import data. So I will prefer database seeding over using a database images. So let's go through the example. This is one example from one of my experiences. We had an application which were using the medications from the FDA. We have, like, the medications are not changing, or they are changing, like, rarely. There were, like, 7,000 medications that we should import to the database an application will use that data. Yeah? There was an endpoint, API endpoint, which was importing 7,000 records to the database within the 10 minutes. Of course, I'm not going to wait 10 minutes, guys. So what I really did, I just exported all this data, and before running the test, I say, like, import this SCV to the database. It's just simply running the query, you see. The example is in Java, and database was PostgreSQL, but it doesn't make sense which tools you are using. The idea is the same, so there are ability to run in any programming language and any database. Another one, for example, I register the user. I have to verify that user to be able to use it in my test. For that, I need to send the OTP to the email, get the OTP code, and then verify my user. It's too long to do for every test because we are doing isolation. We will create user for every test, and every time doing this, it will kill our time. What we do, we just say update the data in the user's database with this email and make it verified directly because we have it's testing environment. We have the access to the database, and then we are printing that the item was updated just for debugging in the future. Another example is getting OTP. Whenever we need to get the OTP and check that we can verify the user from the UI, instead of sending to the email and then using some libraries to read the email and bring that code back, we just read it from the database and give to the test and saying just check the flow. OK, let's switch to the power of the JavaScript. You always can use the power of the JavaScript to speed up your test executions. In this presentation, we'll go through some cases, how we can add, modify the local storage items, element manipulation, event stimulation, and asynchronic operations. For example, we need to manipulate a situation whenever there is some items in the local storage. It's easy to do with the JavaScript. We just say the update, add this item in the local storage with this name. And in the last example, I will show the real example in which cases you can use this one. Another one is whenever, for example, when you click the button text is changing. Or whenever you do something, the UI is changing. And your task is just to make sure that the test presenting correctly on the specific frames. Instead of manipulating whole the scenario to get that, you can just say, you know, this element, set the text of this element, this string, and then check if everything happens correctly. For example, you have a huge test, and it's usually collapsed. You have to click the button to expand it, and then click the button to show less. In this case, instead of creating like end-to-end scenario to give the big test in the database then read, you can just inject the big test and see that the UI, the JavaScript, the UI is working fine. And this is like the principles of the atomic test. We're isolating. With this test, we just need to check that expand and show less functionality works fine, nothing else. The next one is manipulation. Like, for example, scrolling. You just do 500 pixels scroll down, do whenever right, left, and whenever it comes to your mind. And asynchronic operations. This is very useful whenever, for example, you have loading, and you have the functionality saying that if the loading takes more than 3 seconds, show the extra test. Let's say we are asking for your patient like to finish the operation. You just do this callback saying like prolong the situation for 3 seconds, just to get that text instead of turning off the internet connection to manipulate the state or slow connection to get. You just can manipulate it with the JavaScript. And the last and the main and most important thing is the test data preparation with the API. Of course, like most of the applications have ability to create the data with the API because that's how the server and the client-side application work. In this scenario, we will go through logging without UI scenario, project creation in some application, and then cleanup. The logging from without UI is very, very important. One of the main principles of the automation is not doing a duplicate coverage. Duplicate coverage whenever we are going through the same scenario or like several times. And one of that scenarios are logging in from the UI. How you start the testing, you open the login page, you type the login, password, login button, and then continuing your test. Our task is to make sure that we test login only once. And one test is responsible for the login. The rest tests should not go through these flows over again and spending so much time on it. So let's see how we can do this. So this is the example of non-atomic test. What is doing? Opening the login page, setting username, password, clicking the submit button, so we are logged in. Going to the home page, clicking on the footer icon to create, and then going to the project page. Clicking on a create project button, selecting the project type, selecting a name, description, and then submitting a project. Basically, we just created the test data. We created the scenario when we have the project. And then we are navigating to that project page. And we are doing an assertion that some items are visible in the project page. The aim of this test is make sure that the like button or some other buttons are in the project detail page. What we did, we basically tested all the flow coming from the login, creation, navigation, and then to check the buttons. How we can do it better? Login from without UI. What happens when we click the login button? It sends the API call, post request, it gets the token, and it's put to the local storage. You can see that here I'm presenting that the token is in the local storage. How we can get this token to set manually to the local storage and to be authenticated? It's easy. It's just a post request which is sent to the backend, and we are getting back the token. How we can do it in our test? Again, it's easy. For example, here I'm using OKHTTP library, and I'm saying just this is the URL, this is the username, password. We are sending a post request and then getting the response data. From the response data, what I'm doing is I'm setting the new item in the local storage, saying this is the token. I'm reading from the JSON, giving the token. And then I'm also giving the user info because actually application putting also user info. And whenever I navigate to my page, it's already logged in. I don't need to log in manually. This sounds very simple, but unfortunately in my experience, especially interviewing people, maybe 1 of 20 people were using the tricks. The rest 19 were logging from the UI every time. That's why I put this example in the details in the slides to make sure that I would share the idea with a bigger audience. Whenever the token, let's say, it's not in the local storage but in the cookies, it's much easier. You just use, for example, Selenium or Cypress, Playwright, every tool giving you opportunity to play with the cookies. Just do it, just set it there. How we can create the project? Of course, when you create the project from the UI, in the end of the day, it sends the post request to the backend to create the object in the database. We can manipulate it, sending the post request ourselves. Again, here is the parameters that we need to send. It's a private project or not. This is the template. This is the name and the description. Please send the post request to the project's endpoint. And then I'm getting back the project details with the project ID and stuff. When I have the project ID and I can construct the URL, the base URL project / an ID. In different applications, it could be constructed differently, but of course, there is a way to get the a URL to the project. And of course, I have another API call, which is removing the project, because when I test it, I have to remove it to not leave the data in the database. And here is the test that we will have in the end of the day, because in the before test, in the setup, we will log in with without the UI, with the API. We will set into the local storage, and then we will open directly the project page. And this open, just getting the ID from the project, setting it, and directly the first page that I'm landing after the login is the page where I need to do the tests. It could sound like we are spending, we should do these actions for every test, and it may sound like it will take a lot of time, but no. This is the only way that will allow you to run all the tests in parallel. I run tests in 40 parallel runs. This means that my tests were faster 40 times. There is no other better way to speed up your test rather than parallel running. And advantages of atomic tests. If it's going to fail fast. So this is very fundamental thing. In atomic test, if something going to fail, you will get the failure early, not waiting over time. Yeah. And swift feedback. You will always get fast feedback on the new changes. Improved test workflow. So instance test isolation. So your tests will be totally isolated, and they will don't have any dependency of other tests. and risk of reduced coverage and also duplicated coverage. We will avoid having like double coverage on, for example, on the login functionality. And of course, Swift execution, efficiency of atomic tests, so there we are able to run parallel, and it will help us to reduce running time dramatically. And I think, yeah, I make it fast the last several slides because it was blinking on my face and that I don't have a time. So I have my social CM. You can find in a GitHub several repositories when you can find all these solutions in a different context with the Playwright, with Alpium, with the Selenium. Most of them like in a Java, but again, whenever you choose the programming language, the solutions are the same. And thank you very much for your attention. And now I think we can go through some Q&A session.
Yes, we can. OK, big applause. Thank you. OK, breaking tests into automatic parts sounds like unit tests. Don't we have to cover end-to-end flows?
Unit tests are like totally different story. The unit tests shouldn't have any connection with the database. They should be mocked as much as possible. And basically, in my experience, I run like 30,000 unit tests within the 2 minutes because they are fast. And they never going to the end-to-end. In this case, of course, you are going to cover flow, but please cover it once. If you want to cover the project creation, of course, you should have one test which is covering project creation flow. But don't create that, don't go through that UI flow every time whenever you need a project in the test data. For example, whenever you need to cover the issue creation, which requires to have the project, do not go from like via UI creating the project to check the issue creation. Of course, this is kind of, you are covering flows, but kind of like isolated flows. And they are different from the unit tests. But atomic test ideology is also true for the unit testing, to not have the big ones.
OK, we got a question that quickly popped in the front. Parallel execution is nice, but how do you deal with slow SUT?
SUT, what it means?
I have zero idea.
Software?
Yeah, I was just joking. That's the truth.
But how deal with a slow? OK. I'm not sure that I get the question correctly, and whoever wrote the question, just meet me outside. We can discuss it. Sorry.
All the 11 people who wanted to hear the answer, please join them. OK, I agree with atomic test importance in early testing phases. Do you think you can still guarantee the test scope in the final E2E test phases?
Yes. So it's, yeah. I mean, we should get the idea correctly. It's not like isolating, and it's not like skipping the flows. The idea of the atomic test is isolate one flow and never duplicate it. And whenever you have the bug in one flow, you have the one test failing, not huge suite of it. For example, if you have issue in the login, if you are logging in for each test from the UI, 100% of your test will fail. When the API call is fine, the server is fine, just the button is not getting active whenever you type username and a password. So do not squeeze it to the unit test. Squeeze it to the isolated flow. Squeeze it in non-having a duplicate coverage. This is the main 2 ideas.
One more. Any suggestions around maximum test time for test execution to reduce risk of system flakiness?
The system flakiness can come from the environment where we are running. And in my experience, we usually run all this, around the flakiness, I would say whenever you use atomic test, you will have the less flakiness. Because instead of running 30 parallel runs, logging all together from the UI, and comparing to the using the API and the test preparation data will dramatically change the scenario. So if the question is about how we can deal with the flakiness with the atomic test actually helping you to avoid that flaky environment issues.
Thank you so very much, Sargis. One more big applause for our presenter. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will be around and will be happy to answer any other question and discuss the ideas.
During the lunch break, you will be happy if anybody approaches you. Perfect. Yes,
Thank you very much.